Hey everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and I remember when I first discovered what the word skulk meant. Actually, I'm not 100% positive I've got it right. I'm going to Google it. I'm going to make sure that I actually know what the word skulk means, because I use it a lot, and I use it in a way that, to keep out of sight, typically with a sinister or cowardly motive. All right, hey, this is a moment we're having. It turns out I've been using the word skulk right, but for the longest time I wouldn't use it because I wasn't totally positive what it meant, and it sounded like skull, like you sculling around, like your brain, or like skunk, smell bad. But then, I got enough context clues, and I was like, oh, that's like when you're sneaking and skulking about, like in dark corners, like sometimes you see people do, like when you're out driving around late at night, and you're like, hey, why'd that guy disappear? There was somebody skulking about the other day when I was coming down my street. There'd been a few thefts in the area, and I just saw in the shadows one little flare of a cigarette from somebody who was clearly trying to use a tree and a parked car for cover. And of course, I did the thing I always do, which is park my car, hop right out, and, well, hello, sir. My name's Matt. I don't know that I've seen you in the neighborhood before. It's great to meet you. How are you doing tonight? And it's weird. Nobody ever wants to talk to me when I do that. But skulking, we're talking about skulking. The reason that skulking is a word and that people do it is because there's some stuff that sometimes people want to do that if you told everybody what you were up to, you wouldn't ever get away with it because people don't want you to do those bad things. And so you skulk, you weasel, you maneuver, you present things in such a way that you try to blend in and make it subtle so you can get away with things that you could not get away with in the light. There's one outstanding question that we haven't talked about when it comes to Judas Iscariot. I think it's pretty easily and obviously answered, but the question is, why is he making this so difficult? Why are the Pharisees making it so difficult? You're in charge. You're the powerful people. If there's a guy who you need to arrest and slap some trumped up charges on him and have him publicly executed in order for your religion about loving God to continue to work, just go arrest him, right? You're the powerful party here. You're the ones in the position of control. Aha! But if you recall, a few weeks ago, we were breaking this down a little bit, looking at the playing field here and strategically, what's everybody doing? Sun Tzu, Art of Warring It. And I think the conclusion that we rightly came to together was, it seems like they're in the position of control, but they're kind of not in the position of control, the religious authorities, that is. Jesus, even from an entirely human perspective, you set aside all the divinity stuff and break the laws of time and space and superpowers and all of that, Jesus is actually in the superior social position here, and they can't just do whatever they want. So when we're reading this business about Judas Iscariot and his skulking, I think his sneaky behavior actually makes more sense than what it might seem like on the surface. Once again, the passage we're looking at, Matthew 26:14. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went out to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 silver coins. Paraphrase here is going to be mine. He didn't even negotiate. He wasn't like, wait, what kind of silver coins? How much are they going to weigh? What are we doing? They just counted him out. That was their initial offer. And he was like, sweet, yes, implying that he would have done it for probably way less. And then the verse that I'm focusing on today, verse 16, it says, "From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over," which again begs the question, why are we even waiting for an opportunity? The Pharisees have like the Pharisaic temple guard. They got people with swords and long sticks, spears. They got the Romans. I mean, not necessarily like ideologically aligned, but Rome and the religious leadership are in bed together. You're in the position of power. Just go get him. Well, it's been pretty clear from early on that the sentiment of the crowds tilts in favor of Jesus. He came in and people waved palm branches and got excited. He flipped over tables, which should have theoretically been a disastrous PR move, but no, we see that instead, in chapter 21, all the children see him do that, and then they're like, rad, table flipping is the best thing ever. We got Jesus fever, and they're like, Hosanna to the Son of David, and the Pharisees like, are you kidding me? You cannot Hosanna to the Son of David table flipping. It's the end of polite and organized society. You have to be mad at him. You have to. That was a dumb political move. Make the kids stop being excited about you. And Jesus, shrug. Bible, like from the lips of children and infants, you've ordained praise. Think about that one. I'm just going to go back to Bethany now. And then he goes back to Bethany, and the Pharisees get to sit on that one all night and just think about how their support is eroding. And they're like, we know exactly what we're going to do. In order to just defeat him and do what needs to be done, we first have to humiliate him in front of everyone with our superior intellect, even though literally every time we've tried to do that, we've been completely humiliated for 3 years, though we are not going to in any way change our strategy or plan of attack whatsoever. It's just going to be different. He got lucky before, and so they come at him with all these questions. They send out surrogates. They send out rookies. They send out heavy hitters. And as you and I have discussed, the series of questions they pepper him with that theoretically, I mean, clearly they believe nobody could possibly answer this. He just owns them. And all of this is happening in the temple. It's all in front of everyone. The owning is very, very public. And in the midst of all of that owning, one of the key questions that points to our scenario with why they're skulking around with Judas Iscariot and not just doing this in the light is that they come there like, hey, by whose authority are you doing all this? And you remember Jesus replied, I've covered it so many times, but I just love this so very, very much that I'm going to say it again. Jesus replied, Matthew 21:24, I'll also ask you guys one question. The guys is me. If you answer me, I'll tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism, where'd it come from? Was it from heaven or from men? And you'll remember, then they go aside and they're like, oh, yeah, I mean, if we say it's from heaven, he's going to be like, well, why didn't you believe him? But if we say that it's from men, everybody's going to be mad because they like John the Baptist. And so they know dang well they do not have the public support. The political will does not exist for them to just arrest him and execute him. And this political will concept is an important one because sometimes naively, people who still believe in like the rule of law, which I'm for, by the way, just let's be clear. I'm for the rule of law. That is how ordered society works. But the thing that gets in the way of the rule of law and ordered society is politicians and government officials who don't have accountability. And it's been that way for all of human history. The rule of law isn't actually what makes things happen. You know this. We don't continue to have a president because the law said so. We don't do whatever the Supreme Court says because the law said so. We don't do anything because the law says so. We do the things we do as a people because we want to, because there is the political will each and every day so far in my country for 250-ish years or whatever it's been to get up and be like, we should still have a country and we should still have that Constitution. Like the Bill of Rights, in my country, in my mind, that's just absolute. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to say things, even offend people. You have the right to not have your stuff rifled through. You have the right to a fair trial by any government that's like, no, we should be allowed to execute you. Whoa, hold on. There should be some parameters in place. You can't just go around executing whoever you want. And you should have the inalienable right that anything that has not by due process of law been agreed upon by the people to defer to the government on, that's still yours as a human. So I love the Bill of Rights. I think it's like one of the high points in all of human history in the name of justice for all people, and applying that equally to everyone fairly is one of the most just, beautiful things that could happen in society. But the Bill of Rights is something that we continue to extend to each other in my culture because we still mostly feel like it, but only barely mostly. Like that's something that could change. Anything could change depending on political will. Politicians always have grander ideas than what they actually do. They don't have unlimited power. This is going to sound braggy. It's not braggy because it has nothing to do with me. I have a friend who's great at everything and super talented, and he gets invited to fancy things sometimes like the White House. And one time he was like, yeah, you had a really good idea the other day, and I got invited to the White House. We should go and pitch it to the social media team at the White House because I got invited. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come. And so I went. This was the Obama White House, and everybody was really great. We met all the people. We saw how everything worked, and we got to hang around in the White House and the executive offices after we got done with our meeting, which is super fun and productive, I thought. But there was one thing that somebody said that really stood out to me, and it was a guy in his 20s who was a self-described political idealist who was like, oh, yeah, all of us who've worked in this administration, this was at the tail end of Obama, we all could not wait to get in here and to fix all the things that George W. Bush, he was the president in my country before Barack Obama, that everything that W screwed up, we were going to save the world and solve everything. And then we got here and we just realized you can't really do much. It's not nearly as powerful a position as we try to hold it out as being, because really the only thing we can do is what people are up for, and not even like what they vote for, what people are up for. You push anything too far and the whole thing will break. And it's easy to be an idealist when you're an outsider. When you're here, you realize political will is actually a really big deal. It's a little bit paraphrases mine, but not super paraphrasey. That's what the guy said. Look, that is the exact same relationship between authority and the crowds that is on display here in the last few chapters of the book of Matthew. So much of the dynamic that we're seeing here has to do with the tension between these two parties and the fact that, as is so often the deciding factor in everything in Roman imperial history, it comes down to the crowds. Remember Gladiator? The crowds all want that guy to be spared. It doesn't matter what the emperor wants. He has to please those crowds, or it's a drop in the bucket of revolt and rebellion. Like, he has to play along with what they want. And so in that Colosseum, the crowds really did have a louder voice than the emperor, even though the emperor theoretically gives the final thumbs up or thumbs down. The Pharisees were politically savvy. They knew this was the case. They cannot just go and catch Jesus in the places that he hangs around and arrests him. I mean, look at what's his cycle. He's going back and forth to Bethany, which, as we talked about, is out, down a little valley, up a hill, maybe a couple miles from the old city of Jerusalem and the temple, not very far. It's a super well-traveled road. He's going to travel at appropriate times with people all around. People know who he is. People are excited. What are you going to do? Just walk right up with a bunch of swords and Roman soldiers even in tow and just nab him off the road? You can't do that. Picture somebody that the current administration in your country doesn't like very much right now. What would happen if they just walked up to him at like a mall, or walked up to some lady that's a thorn in your administration's side, at a football game, and put a black bag over their head and hauled them away in a van labeled the government? It would be absolutely devastating for them in terms of popular support. Same thing is happening here for the Pharisees. They cannot just go arrest Jesus. They got to catch him at a vulnerable point when he's exposed and nobody is going to be there to get upset about it. Then they can start the ball rolling. And once they're even a few hours into it, if nobody has erupted into protest yet, you can start to develop a case for, this is very important. This is legal. This is lawful. This is what has to be done. And then fear of authority will gradually take over. Sometimes governments just do things. If the initial shock of the event can be not public, that makes it easier for them to just do things. That's a plan here. So what's Judas's role? Well, his role is to sell out Jesus at the right time. All Jesus's movements are far too public. You need an insider to be like, yeah, here's exactly the time. And also, we want to make sure we don't have an I'm Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus moment. Remember, there aren't mug shots in the ancient and classical world. You got to go with certain identifiers. Somebody could easily claim to be Jesus who isn't, looks enough like him. Then you're not really putting down this brewing rebellion, because rumor would circulate that you got the wrong guy. You need an insider who can vouch for that is the guy and this is when he is vulnerable, so that all of your trumped up charges and your one shot at this arrest will not be botched and you can get away with what you're doing. That is why verse 16 says, from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over, because you can't do it whenever, because the crowds are still in play. Judas has now officially flipped from strategizing for the kingdom towards strategizing in favor of Jesus' demise. Fascinating. On to the Passover tomorrow. What in the world? A whole bunch of you just jumped in to support the program, 4 or 5 people in the last few days. Wow. Thank you. That is so wildly encouraging. Also wildly encouraging. Thank you to all of you who went and listened to the new Good Ideas for Churches podcast. That's something that's meant to be practical and helpful that I'm working with my buddy Aaron on. We have 2 episodes out now. I think they're good. I think we're being honest about the reality of the situation as it's unfolding right now. And you can sit around and complain about it forever and be frustrated by the state of the world and the fact that things just inevitably change. Or we could all try to do something positive with it and think about stuff that would work to build beautiful things together. So I'm excited about that podcast and grateful for those of you who took the opportunity to check it out. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.